Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe. And today I'm excited to have my friend, David T. David T's been sober since July 2nd, 2018. He's married and a proud bonus dad, and is anchored by a small immediate family and surrounded by a much larger extended family through his wife. When he's not staying active in recovery, David's usually outdoors, fishing, being on the water, or getting his hands dirty with woodworking, leatherworking, and just about any kind of tinkering. His home is full of life, thanks to a lively mix of pets, including dogs, cats, fish, and even a snake. Service has been a cornerstone of David's recovery from early on, and it shows in the way he lives. Steady, hands-on, and always willing to give back. His story is a great reminder that recovery isn't just about staying sober, but about building a meaningful, grounded life. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. Hey, David, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Not too shabby. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your willingness to come on the show.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
So, tell me, what was it like growing up, David?
Oh, man. So I always say fairly normal. I guess that's a subjective kind of word. Fairly normal Oak Ridge existence. Now, my parents did get divorced when I was pretty young, but there was no craziness going on in any way that one could imagine, really. Both were in the picture still. Younger sister. School was fairly normal. I guess really the only things that stand out are the divorce, for sure. Not to downplay that. But just moving to Oak Ridge at an early age. For anybody that's from Oak Ridge, they might know this. But it's a certain kind of people here, a certain kind of town. And that outsiderish feeling was always kind of there, which, that's one of those things that we hear a lot. Not fitting in, being an outsider, things like that. So that was from a young age. That was one of those things that I was very well aware of. Throughout high school, I guess this is the what it's like portion, something like that.
Sure, David, what it's like.
Or what it was like, yeah. Nothing too crazy happened until, I guess it was around the end of sophomore year of high school. I got, my friend groups changed a little bit. I grew up, I was a super, super nerdy, quiet kid. Always in a book or a video game or something like that. Very shy, socially awkward, all of those fun things. And somehow or another, my friend group kind of changed around sophomore year. And this was, there was one individual in particular, his family was, they were foreign, a little bit different culture. And we got pretty close. And it turns out they were big drinkers. And the short story is that year, I was spending the night over there, and he snuck up in the middle of the night and snuck back down with, I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever played the you take a little bit, a couple millimeters out of each bottle to make a mixture, but it won't be noticeable by the parents, right? So that happened. And then he brought it back downstairs. And I guess I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't have any expectations or anything. Um, so he takes his little sip and then he hands it to me. And I take my little sip, and it was disgusting. Absolutely. But what always, in my mind, what I always remember is the burn, right, going down. I remember that and liking it, the warm feeling. And next thing I knew, this little glass that he had prepared was gone, and here I was wanting some more of it. So I think that time, for a while there, we got away with doing that, and then he started to worry that it would be noticed, because from that point on, every time I came over to his house, it was, well, let's do that again. That became part of the motivation for heading over there. So pretty quickly, it became apparent. I worked from a young age. We never had a ton of money. So by that point in life, I was working, back when Sears was still a thing. I worked in the electronics department of Sears with a lot of older people. So it was pretty easy to hoodoo somebody or pay somebody a little bit extra to take care of what I was hunting. And from that point on, it was that was the defining thing for the rest of, I don't know if childhood is right, teenage years, whatever. Working, school took a backseat. I had always been a pretty good student, not perfect, but more A's than B's, let's put it that way. And that very much changed. School was a backseat item. I worked and partied, that changed. What partying looked like changed a little bit over the years, whether it was with people or just slipping around, hiding, doing it myself. But for the most part in those years, it was still a social thing. So
What was the feeling like around your family with drinking? Was there anybody in your family that, like, was it normalized in your family? Did it just not occur? Or
that's a good question. It was, well, there's kind of some mixed views in my immediate family. There was just my mom, my sister, and I. And it was pretty normal. My mom wasn't, and of course, I can't qualify anybody for anything. But I would say that my mother never had a problem, does not have a problem now. But she definitely had fun back then. So it was pretty normalized. There were definitely plenty of times where her collection was the one with a couple millimeters coming out of each bottle. So I mean, I guess it was pretty normal. It wasn't a big deal, but there was no real issues there, not from her or my dad's side that I'm aware of.
so it's just now that you've come clean with your mom and the millimeters, we may have to make amends to her and give her back what was missing. I'm just kidding, David. That was
no, that time is long since passed.
just bad joke. Sorry, people. So you're in high school and partying is becoming more and more. Is that fair to say, more part of your life and more importance, I guess?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very fair. One might almost say that it's more of what I revolved around at that point. In one way or another, there was a lot to it. At that point, it wasn't just about getting drunk. There was the other things we hear about in the rooms. It made me, or from my perspective, it made me more likable. I could talk to people better, especially girls, all that sort of thing. Less awkward. So that played a big part in it, I guess. But in one way or another, I pretty much revolved around it by the end, anyway.
What did was there anybody that noticed at this point? Did anybody say anything to you about, hey man, you might want to slow down or
There was one guy, and he stands out because he was one of those from back when I guess the nerdier days, the younger years, that he kind of stuck around when even through my new interests, you might say. And I will never forget one of the things that when I look back and I'm like, man, that should have been a red flag. I don't know if it was junior year, senior year, somewhere in there. We were it was a bunch of us over at someone's house. And I was fooling around. I was pretty well toasted. I was fooling around and I picked something up and I just kind of tossed it at him. Not with the intention of having fun, like joking around. But I tossed it pretty hard and it hit him square in the forehead. And he came after me ready to go. And it was one of those things. I was like, man, he never let that go. And looking back, I can see why I was kind of an ass at the time. That characterizes most of my drinking career. Is kind of an ass, but yeah, he did. He had some choice words for me, and at the time, it was just kind of shrugged it off, moved on with life. But I guess I never thought about that. I guess he probably was the first one. But then after that too, there was I passed out I guess it was my 18th birthday actually. And my girlfriend at the time and I were going to see a movie. And I remember we got to the movie theater and got out of the car there. And I stood up out of the car and I was super lightheaded. I was like, let me smoke a cigarette real quick. So I'll go to light this cigarette. And the next thing I know, I wake up. I'm on the ground on my back. There's all these people around me. They're talking about, do they need to call the ambulance? And after that, no ambulance was called. I recovered completely. But she's had some words for me at that point. Both of her parents did have, they would have qualified for one program or another. And I think maybe they did at the time. So she definitely had some experience with it.
Yeah, so I kind of it's when you look back, like I know for me too, Dave, like I look back and I'm like, yeah, that I never thought about that, but that really wasn't normal. Not everybody was doing it, So you graduate high school. What did you do after high school, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, absolutely. So the plan had always been, for a long time, college was the plan. What I was going to major in changed a couple times. At one point the big one was marine biology. I was always into that. And then I started thinking about what would be a little bit easier. It turned out I didn't like science and all the labs and stuff as much as I thought. I wanted to go play with the fish, right? Not sit in a lab and do all of that stuff. So believe it or not, what I settled on, literature was another big thing for me. So I made up my mind I wanted to be an English teacher. And I went to one of the local community colleges here. In the first semester, it became super evident that I was just not interested. I had graduated high school. Felt like I was my own person. I didn't have to answer to people as much at that point. And there was, maybe more importantly, in college, there was nobody writing emails or calling home about me missing class, So it turned into, to me, I maybe went to, gosh, I don't even know, maybe the first 2 weeks I went to every class. And then after that, I got to the point where I was just skip this one or skip that one, or, oh, he had homework he was expecting, so I'm not going there. So I would hang out, and I was still living at home, so I couldn't just stay at home all day. But I would hang out and get like an extra large Chick-fil-A tea and drink about half of it and refill it with something else and just go find stuff to do, and that went on for 2 semesters. I did that. And at that point, the letters started showing up about scholarships. It was all one of those scholarships. I don't know if it was Hope or what at the time, but I was pretty much entirely based off of income scholarship stuff, and those started going away. So I'd always had this backup plan to, if college didn't work out, there was always the military, right? So college wasn't working out, and I had to figure something out because there was no money, and the scholarships were going away. So I had to figure out something to tell my parents. So I go down. I went, I guess the first time or two I met with the recruiter, they didn't even know any of this was going on. So by the time that they caught wind of it and they asked, I was able to present like, well, I've been meeting with the recruiter down at the Army place. I think this is what I want to do with my life. School's just not for me. That whole spiel, right? And that was it.
We have, it's funny when as soon as you said, like, I didn't like science, I was like, I can't, I started out, I wanted to be a physical therapist when then I realized, like, I took my first chemistry class and I was like, this is not for me. I can't do this. There's no way. And I too was on, back when I went to, when I was there, I'd gotten Pell Grants, which is all based on your financial need, because we didn't have a whole lot. And I lost all of that stuff. Spent 6 years at a 2-year school. So probably should have joined the military, to be honest. I mean, I look back on that and I was like, I was so immature. And, so you joined the Army? Is that what?
Yes. 2000, I guess it was the beginning of 2011. I left basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, in the middle of the winter, and that sucked. It was made to be notable for me because at that point that was the longest since I was introduced to alcohol and the things that sometimes go with it. That was the longest that I had been without that. But there was so much going on that it wasn't really, the days just flew by. So there wasn't really a lot of time to think about that or stress about that at all. I left, went to, from there I came back for a brief amount of time, went to job training after that. And from there, my first duty station was in Alaska, right outside of Fairbanks. That was, I guess, the summer of 2011. Once I got there, I should probably backtrack and say that the girl that I was dating at the time when I passed out in the movie theater thing, we also got married in between all of those things. So I moved to first duty station, Fort Wainwright, and she followed not too long. There was paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork for things like that in the military. So it ended up being a couple months, but then she followed me up there at that point. Once I got there, people say sometimes that the military has like a drinking culture. That's not specifically the Army, even though that's where I was. And I guess that's, to a certain extent, that's probably true. Um, but not that many people drank like I wanted to drink. When I got there, I was 19, maybe 20. I guess by the time I got to Alaska, I was 20. And at that point, I was, I could do anything I wanted, in my mind anyway, short of buying anything myself. Um, but I was looking, I expected it to be one big party, right? And it wasn't starting off. So to me, that was kind of, I don't know if disappointing. It was kind of disappointing. But that disappointment quickly, it wasn't a big deal because there was plenty of folks who had no issue going to the store for me, right? And at this point, I'm 20. These are all my coworkers, for lack of a better way to put it. The guys in my platoon, my squad, most of them were a little bit older than me, so that wasn't an issue. But during that time, those couple of months before my first wife came up to join me, all of the red tape got handled. I wasn't accountable hardly to anyone. And I think that was a point that really, it was like a switch kind of flipped. It was probably the first times that I drank into the night knowing that I had to get up and do things the next morning. Woke up, I don't know, we always said things about waking up still drunk, and I don't know whether that's true or whether it was a hangover. Never got breathalyzed to find out. Definitely woke up still feeling drunk and went to go do PT, and those who know, I guess. That could be anything from running a couple miles to strength training kind of things. And just getting up feeling like crap and going and doing that stuff anyway. And eventually you kind of get used to it. At that point, when my wife joined me up there, things calmed down a little bit. But very quickly, we got to the point that it wasn't a fight yet, but she was noticing very quickly the amount that I was drinking, how many nights per week I was drinking at all. Again, like I said, her parents both had their own issues. So it was something that she was very aware of, something that she watched. And she was not a drinker herself at all. So what all that meant was that, and maybe this is another one of those things looking back that's ding, 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 red flag. Very quickly, honestly, I don't even know if I was 21 before I started hiding from her how much I was drinking. That came really quick. And it stayed that way for a long time. There was maybe another year and a half or so passed. And I would get myself into trouble because I'd be hiding how much I was drinking. Wasn't affecting anything but the home life at that point in time, So I'd be hiding it, and then every once in a while, I'd do something dumb where it would become apparent. It wasn't just, oh, David's tired tonight. He's just going to bed earlier. He's just gonna sit in the garage and tinker on something and do something stupid, like trip over something really stupid and have a hard time getting up. And she'd look at me and it'd be like she knew. So enough of those things happened. And then some of my coworkers who I drank with outside of work, a couple of things happened there. And I was told again, both by the wife and the coworkers that, hey, maybe you should look at this. Maybe you should slow down a little bit. I said, you know what? Maybe you're right, is what I said. And I knew about it in the Army, it's called the Army Substance Abuse Program. Everybody knew about it. It was a thing. I joined around the time that they were under a lot of scrutiny because there were a lot of, with that whole drinking culture thing, there was a lot of drinking and driving, accidents happening, people getting hurt, and a lot of it was high-ranking folks, and it was just getting swept under the rug. So around that time, with all the scrutiny going on, they started really cracking down on these things, these events. And we'd have safety briefs about it all the time. So everybody knew that if you needed help, there was help out there, right? They made clear that everyone knew about it. So I said, you know what, maybe I could slow down a little bit. Let me go talk to these people, give it a shot. So I self-referred to that program. Went to go do like the entrance interview, I guess. It was a super nice lady that I talked to. She asked a little bit about my drinking and all of that. And I answered the questions, asked what I was looking for, and I answered those questions. And it was always just to slow down a little bit. I'm starting to have these consequences, and I want the consequences to stop. I want the fun to keep happening. I just want the consequences to stop. And this lady told me, this was probably the second or third session. She told me, she said, in all likelihood, you'll never be able to drink again. Man, she told me the wrong thing. At that point, I heard her, and I said, huh, well then. So I had already been accepted into this thing. It's not a program that just anybody can do. You have to go and you have to qualify. And then they have to tell your command that, yes, we think this guy has a problem, and the command has to sign off on it. So all of this had already happened. So I was stuck, minimum of 90 days that I had to be in this. It was an outpatient deal, but I had to keep going for this minimum of 90 days. But she lost me right then when those words came out of her mouth. I was like, this is not for me. This is not the program that I want. So just like we say in the program today, we say fake it till you make it. Well, that's exactly what I did back then too. I faked it until I graduated.
I don't think that's what they mean by that, David. I'm just saying that was.
No, not at all. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
At that point, after the 90 days were up, well before the 90 days were up, I was back to it again. I had went. It was probably a total of maybe 2 weeks, ish, that I stayed away completely. There was always this looming, like this, I don't know, axe above your head that at any point in time they could call you in for a urinalysis or a breathalyzer if they wanted to. And that never happened. And after about the 2 weeks or so, I figured that, well, as long as I waited until 6 or 7 p.m., then I could do what I wanted. Nobody was going to call me in at that point. So that's what happened. I think it's probably important for my story anyway to note that during that time, like I said, I guess I was probably 23 at the point, maybe even 22, 23 in there somewhere. And during those couple of weeks that I wasn't drinking, remember there was Benadryl, there was Z-Quil, there were all these things. I was hunting a substitute, and finding that was the trouble sleeping was definitely a thing already at that point. And that's something that shows up throughout my story as well. Just the dependence that the body can have for these things. So from then on, the rest of my time in Alaska was we had a couple exercises where we went. We were a training brigade, is what they called us. And we did these things primarily it was the aviation regiment, and we would help prepare. I was support was my job, fuel, and then later on ammo as well. But we were support, and we never were deployed anywhere. We would go to these training exercises and help these aviation units get ready, and then they would go do their thing, and so on and so forth. So other than these training exercises, which would be, 3 weeks to a month at the most normally, it was pretty steadily. There was nothing holding me back, no long breaks in any of my drinking. The things continued to be strained at home. We did shift work for the most part out on the airfield. And it was towards the end of that time, I guess, was the first time. So weekends were normally kind of like a standby thing. Sometimes they would fly a couple birds. Normally it would be the Chinooks. They would fly weekends a little bit more than anybody else. So if you were on standby that weekend, you weren't supposed to be drinking. And that was the first time that, I did, and I figured it would be okay. That the chances of getting called in were low. And then I ended up getting called in a couple of times after I had been not super trashed, but definitely probably over the legal limit. So that happened a couple times, and that was new because it had always been kept off duty hours, but then it wasn't. I got only once that I can remember that anyone ever smelt it on me. And I kind of played it off like it was fairly early in the morning, I think, on a Saturday. And I said something about it was probably from the night before or something like that. But like I say, that was important because it hadn't interfered with my work. I would get up feeling like crap. And like I said earlier, I would just be used to it. So just go on about my day. The nausea or whatever would pass by about breakfast time and be good to go. So after that, my next duty station was Fort Bliss, Texas. So left, we drove from Fairbanks, Alaska down there. We stopped in Washington State for a little while. There's some family there to visit, but we drove the whole trip and ended up making like a 2-week road trip out of it. And down through Canada it was interesting. It was an experience. It was one of those things that I think people dream about, making a road trip like that up through Canada and going to see all the places. And it's something that I would love to do again sometime. But I don't have many memories. I've got a couple pictures. I don't have much memory of it because most of it was, that part of Canada was pretty rural for the most part, the route that we took. So as far as finding liquor stores, and then making it into them and back out of them without getting caught on this trip by my wife, B, it was a pretty stressful time for me. There was not much of the scenery going on. I'd take pictures and should take pictures. And I remember that there were some pretty tense times when, I wanted to keep driving and she wanted to stop at this cute little town or whatever. And it was, for me, of course, she didn't know this, or if she did, she didn't say anything. But for me, I wanted to keep going to the point that we found somewhere with a liquor store. They call them something else up there, and I don't remember what it is. But that's what I was always looking for. And then the flip side of that coin is that a lot of them closed really early up there too. They didn't have hours like we do down here, where you can get it just about any time you want it. So there were times when I would want to stop when we could keep driving for another couple hours, and there would be an argument about that. When realistically, I wanted to stop somewhere where I could get her set up in a hotel and slip off before before the stores closed. So we end up making it down. The road trip happens. Stop, visit with the family in Washington, keep going down, and we get to Texas. It was a really stressful time for a whole lot of reasons, but the climate change was probably the biggest one. In October in Fairbanks, it was snowing, hovering right around freezing daytime temperatures. And then we get down to El Paso in October, and it's like 95, 96 or something like that. Like, I can remember just being miserable. We were in a hotel at the time while we were house hunting. And I remember leaving the hotel to go sit in the car with the AC on because of how crappy the AC in the hotel was. And it was just, I was not made for it. It was terrible. But we ended up finding this place. Moved in, got settled with the new unit, all of that. And nothing really out of the ordinary except for my drinking at that point. At this point, I was starting to make a lot more of those mistakes, tripping over stuff, falling asleep in really weird situations, things like that, where it became evident to her that something was going on again. She would find it, when I thought I was being slick, I'd have like a pint of this, a pint of that. And I would just hide these little empty pint bottles all over the place to dispose of later. And I would forget where I was stashing them, right? So she was forever finding these little freaking pint bottles that I had stashed all over the place. And it was always a fight. She would have people come, like high school girlfriends and stuff like that would come to visit us. And I would make a fool of myself, embarrass her. And things like that. And eventually she, I couldn't tell you at this point how long it was until this happened, but she came and she said she'd found an internship in Washington where it was her side of the family up there. And she was thinking about checking it out. And I was supportive of that. Of course, why not? Get out of my hair. So I was supportive of that. So she leaves, goes and does that. Time passes. I don't know how much time it was. It was probably just a summer thing. And around the time that she would have been coming back, she decides that, I think I'm going to stay up here for a little while. More power to you. Because the whole time that she had gone, what really happened was I had that freedom again from when I very first moved, that freedom that I wasn't accountable to anybody, and I could do whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. And that's exactly what I'd been doing. There was no hiding the pints anymore. There was empty fifths in the trash can. There was a handle of this there. There was all of this. And the place was a wreck. The house was a wreck. And she had taken we had 2 dogs and 2 cats at the time. No, that's not, excuse me, 2 dogs and 1 cat. The dogs she had taken with her because when I had to go out for like a week at a time training or whatever, dogs just wouldn't work out. But the cat I kept. It was her cat. So I had the cat, she had the dogs. And it's a miracle at that point that I was even taking care of the cat. I was keeping on alive. Wasn't paying bills, wasn't doing any of that. I was still going to work, still performing well. I was always a high performer. Until the end, that is. I was always a high performer. I was good at what I did. And I knew it. I was that the ego was real there. But anything outside of work was it was a crap show at that point.
Yeah.
The bills weren't getting paid, and eventually they got an eviction notice put on because that's what happens. You don't pay these people rent. Landlord wants their money. You still don't pay it. Then you get an eviction notice. So I said, okay, let me see what I'm going to do about this. And what I did was I got on Craigslist. This was back when Craigslist was still a thing. Found a room for rent. And I took a weekend and I packed up the house, didn't say a word to the landlord, and just boom, gone just like that. Wasn't the first time that I moved. There was a couple of different rooms for rent going on there. And they ended up ending, those relationships ended for different reasons. Sometimes it was stuff that I did. Sometimes it was instability in the renter's life going on. But there was a couple of strange situations there. None of them were good.
So did you ever think like, well, my wife is on an internship and now you're kind of homeless, really, if you're going from place to place, and not really having a stable home. Was that kind of the start of the turning point for you, or was it just the beginning, so to speak?
No, that was just the beginning, Joe. It's funny that you ask, because on the last of these little roommate kind of situations, she hits me up and she was ready to come back, right? She was ready to come back. And at this point, I guess it had been, I don't know, a year and a half or so. She was ready to come back to El Paso. And I was like, well, I don't know if now's a good time. So that's fast forwarding a little bit. But you brought it up, so I had to make sure that I got that in there. During all of this time, also, at some point or another, I ended up starting to drink at work. The drunk-a-log in its entirety there, I can probably skip through. But we got to the point where I was towards the end there in El Paso. I was drinking from the time that I woke up in the morning, all throughout the work day, till the time that I passed out in the afternoon or evening or whenever it happened. Because of the relationships that I had built by, like I said, being a high performer, and because of how good I was at what I did, I was given a lot of grace during those times that I shouldn't have been afforded, but I was. So I got away with that kind of behavior for a while. Not that everybody knew about all the drinking, but the showing up whenever I wanted to. Just completely undisciplined at that point was definitely a thing, and I got away with that part. I got this, the beginning of the end down there anyway, I guess, was the drinking at work continued to the point that I was leaving, not even at normal time. I was leaving early. I was trashed is what it was. And I was starting to feel sick. It was probably about 4 p.m. or something like that. So without telling anybody, I just left. What I did, got in my car and went to start driving off post. stopped at the store on the way, like right by the gate to leave. There's shop at is what we call them. Stopped there, and it's like a convenience store, but they also sold alcohol, like not just beer. You could go in there, buy vodka and all of that. So I stopped there, get a bottle, go to leave, and as I'm leaving their parking lot, I hop a curb. I was so messed up. If I noticed at the time, I don't remember noticing. But I did it so hard that I popped 2 tires on the car. And it's funny because at the time, for a long time, I held on to a resentment against this dude. There was some little lieutenant, young and fresh out of OCS, that seen me leaving and seen me do this and continue driving like that. So he called the MPs. I didn't know any of this was going on. I didn't even know my 2 tires were out. So I go out the gate and proceed to head up the on-ramp to the interstate. Right. I don't know how far down the interstate I made it, but they eventually caught up with me, arrested me, took me to wherever they took me. My platoon leader came and bailed me out at some point that night. I have no idea how long I was there. I was just completely gone, right? So this also transpired while this was before my wife had decided that she wanted to come back too. So at this point, I had this DUI experience. I had moved around a couple of times. And I'd never fixed my vehicle at the time from this. You can probably imagine that if you drive a vehicle in that condition, anywhere close to highway speed, a decent amount of damage gets done. And that's exactly what happened. I never got that fixed, so I was relying on other people for rides. I was doing this roommate thing. Got this DUI going on. So it was not the way that I worded it, but just one excuse after another as far as why she couldn't come back. And around that time, they were talking, the unit we were gearing up to deploy at that time. So they come to me and they were like, all right, we've got, I mentioned earlier about the consequences and them cracking down on DUIs and things. And the short version of it is we've got to get this together one way or another. You can go and do, earlier I had been to an outpatient treatment thing, the ASAP program. They also did an inpatient thing. And the options that I were given was go to the inpatient thing, get it together, and go with the unit, or get out at the time. And it was, this was about maybe 18 months before I was supposed to, my ETS, time to get out of the military was anyway. So I told these people, I was like, I don't need that. I don't need to go to your thing. So whatever. If you're going to let me go, just let me go. They said, okay, started the paperwork. And that's a lengthy process as well. So I was just kind of floating almost at this point in time. Still drinking every bit as heavily. Still no vehicle. Still sleeping on a couch. Everybody started getting ready to leave. So at that point, it was kind of in a oh crap scenario, because these people that I'd been relying on, they were all deploying, right? There was no more charity to be had, really. So I got the lady who was in charge of the barracks at that time. As a married soldier, I wasn't supposed to have a barracks room. But she had been one of my soldiers at one point. And we knew each other pretty well. So she snuck me a barracks room, got me set up there. and somebody else had left me. Well, it was actually two different people had left me sets of keys to their vehicles, right? So I was still floating a little bit, but I was doing okay in my mind. It's the insanity of that, looking back at it now, Um, but I was still doing okay in my mind. Though there was no rock bottom there. Um, One thing led to another. The paperwork finally got done. So I started trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life at this point, Um, One thing that hadn't come up at this point is pretty quickly after getting to Alaska. This was one of those things that in my alcoholic thinking at the time, it seemed like a good idea not to bring up anything about my marriage to my family, right? It was kind of an elopement deal. And then questions started coming up, things started happening. Um, and the easiest thing for me at the time was to just stop responding. So that's what I did for about 7 years. So I had to make those reconnections to figure out where I was going to go once I got out. So that's what happened. And then I ended up back here in Tennessee. At that point, I still probably had about 4 or 5 months of drinking left in me. Those family bridges that were rebuilt just enough to secure me somewhere to come back to, I burnt all of those to the ground at that point. And then I got a letter in the mail, phone call, saying that DUI from at this point, it was going on 2 years since the DUI, that not only had it been an Army thing, it turns out that it was also a Texas state or city. I don't know what exactly the offense was, but it was a criminal matter as well. They wanted me to come back to Texas and stand trial for that. Told them that I would, and then I proceeded to get drunk and miss my flight to get down there. So I got failure to appear there. And like any good alcoholic, I decided that ignoring that problem was the best way to handle it. That went on for a while until eventually they showed up. They had their warrants. They had their buddies to help them with the warrants. And I got picked up off of that. My mother, God bless her, worked out something with the judge here in Knoxville to get me released in judicial custody to her while awaiting time to stand trial again. And this was again down in Texas. So we go down, I go down to stand there before the magistrate. It's funny the way they do it down there. It was a federal magistrate because it happened on federal property. So it became a federal crime at that point. And I've said all of this, and it's been kind of long-winded, but it's all coming to this point where in some of the literature that's out there, it talks about us getting drunk at just the wrong moment. And this is probably the defining part of that, is the morning. It was a Monday morning, and up to this point, I was still drinking every bit as heavily as I could. And I wake up probably 4 or 5 in the morning, and I've got a water bottle about halfway full of vodka still stashed away from the night before. So I was still hiding all of these things with the judicial custody. My mom had to travel to El Paso with me. So I get up before her, and I've got this stashed stuff. And I was like, I don't know. I've got this failure to appear. I might have to do some time, whatever. So I can't leave this for her to find. So what am I going to do with it? Everybody who drank like me probably already knows what I'm going to say. But I drank it. It was, I don't know. I couldn't tell you how many ounces it was at this point in time, but it was a lot. It was not one of the little dinky water bottles. It was at least half full. And do that. We go meet the pretrial lady, and she says, "Okay, let's head back here to do some paperwork before the appearance." So we get back to her office, and it wasn't paperwork she wanted to do. She had smelled the liquor on me. They had a breathalyzer waiting. I don't remember what I blew at this point, but I can tell you that it was well over the legal limit, and this was 8 a.m. So they weren't pleased. Neither was the magistrate. When I still, in my current state at the time, I still went before him. He was not pleased. I got 30 days plus 18 months probation. And that morning, that was July 2nd, 2018. That was my last drink. From there, I got released. And it was weird the way they did it. They turned me loose for a little bit. And I was back here in Knoxville, or the Knoxville area. And I started going to meetings. At this point, it had been suggested to me prior to then. But now it wasn't a suggestion. It was, you better go and you better get this thing signed. So I did that it was just shy of 30 days. And I didn't drink. I wasn't interested in meetings at all. I can still remember being on the phone with people just complaining up a storm about this idea. And it was contempt prior to investigation. I had this idea that it was going to be super religious. And I wasn't interested in that. Not whatsoever. It was one of these, I've heard it said before, this idea of being terminally unique. And that describes me very well, as far as if you had the life that I had, you would drink like me, that kind of idea. If you had the withdrawal effects that I had, you wouldn't stop like I didn't stop. All of these things. But somehow or another, I did. I stayed sober for a little bit. 20 whatever days it was. Then I had to go back, do the time. I know it was less than 30 because I can remember being incarcerated at the time and thinking that I was supposed to get my damn chip. But there was no chip to be had. At the time, there was political things going on down there with, I guess, I don't know, first round of border stuff is the right way to put it. But it was back when all of that was first becoming a hot topic. And all the El Paso County jails and all of that were full as a result. So I got shipped to the prison in New Mexico it was funny. It was always, the joke was that it was the shortest prison sentence that anybody there had ever heard of. But that's what I did. I was there. It was fairly uneventful. I was a short timer, and I guess because of that, nobody paid too much interest in me. But I got out. Then when I got out, I was stuck in Texas for a couple more months because I had to get probation transferred, and in the federal system, that's slow. I can't speak for any others. I'm sure they're slow too, but it's a slow thing down there. I was going to meetings still, getting my paper signed. For those next, it was probably, I guess, 2 months there before I got to come back to Tennessee. But at this point, I was still, I was dry. I wasn't interested in doing any work or anything like that. I would look at the things on the wall and hear the things that were said. And it'd be like, well, I can agree with this. I would pick and choose, right? I could get with this, I can't get with that. And it would just depend on the day. I finally get to come back to Tennessee and keep going to meetings here. And, I've heard it called working the fellowship before. And that's exactly what I did. My life wasn't too great at the time. I didn't feel that my life was too great at the time. There's nothing to do. I had lost my license at that point. I was working part-time, wasn't allowed to go anywhere because I had some pretty strict probation stuff going on as far as curfews, things of that nature. And then when I was able to drive, it was very, very restrictive driving. So as a result, I was allowed to go to work and I was allowed to go to meetings. Was just about it. At least in the beginning there. So I went to a lot of meetings out of boredom, I guess. I worked a lot of the fellowship. And at some point, it got to where, remember, I was just as miserable without drinking. I was still dry at this time. I was just as miserable without drinking as I had been when I still was. And I got to this point that I knew I could change that. I knew how to feel better. There was all of these things. For me, drugs weren't a huge part of my story just because of the drug testing that they do in the Army. As a teenager, I fooled around with a lot of stuff. And after the Army, I fooled around a fair amount as well. But for me, it was always mostly drinking. But the point is, I knew how to make myself feel better. But at the same time, I had kind of gotten to the point that I kind of liked being able to remember the night before, being clear-headed and having a little bit of decision-making skills. Those months had passed, and things like learning how to sleep again. I had already done that, and a lot of that was just out of fear. I didn't want to go back to prison. That had sucked. So I was dry and I was staying dry. But my other option was I knew what the people in those rooms, allegedly, I knew how they were living. So I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I asked a guy to sponsor me. He said yes. And I guess the rest is history. I drug my feet through, as I've said this so many times, I drug my feet through everything. It was the one I had to schedule a meeting with my sponsor to go over my inventory just to finish my inventory. Once I had that date with him down, it was the night before, and I'm like, well, shit, now I got to do it, right? So, same thing with amends, man. I drug my feet. And I was always told that when the pain was great enough, that's when it would happen. And it did. I was blessed. As of right now, I've not been back out. I'm told there's yet, you're eligible too. I have to keep doing these things. But my life has completely changed since then. This has been a very, very long-winded what it was like and what happened. But what it's like now, I guess, is really the important part. And it's completely different, Joe. This life, being able to be of service in a selfless way is something that was completely new to me. That's not the way that I lived as a kid. That's not the way I was always the bad kid, lying, stealing. And then those things, I did the same things as a teenager, did the same things as an adult. doing anything for anyone without getting something in return was a completely foreign idea to me.
We have that in common, David. I think a lot of us do. I remember, when I came in and it was like, let me get this. You want me to do something for someone, but not expect anything in return. Like, won't they owe me one? And it was explained like, no, we don't keep score. We don't keep score. And I was like, and that was like a totally new concept. So I understand that, and I love your shortest prison sentence, David. I just think that's great. I would always say that because I had a couple of DUIs, one reduced, but I had to do, some jail time. And I would always jokingly say I had to join a gang for the 48 hours I was in there. It's the only way I could survive. But anyway. So what are some of the good things that have happened in your life since you've been sober?
The biggest thing, man, the biggest thing is hard to say because I don't think there is one biggest thing. The first thing that comes to mind is relationships. In the beginning, that was with a sponsor, that was with other men in the program, because I didn't know how to do that. Opening up to somebody, sharing my fears, my secrets, was completely foreign as well. So getting to learn to do that, and those are the relationships that are still enduring. Those are the ones that, not just those, more have come, but when things are going bad, those are the relationships that save my butt. And that's one aspect of it. The family, I shared that it was a little over 7 years. I completely cut out my entire biological family. And the vast majority of those relationships, those have all healed, my mom, that was one of the worst ones, after all the things that I had put her through. We have this amazing relationship today. I was just out there, myself and my bonus daughter got to spend the day out there, most of it, helping her, which we've done quite a bit. Just going out there and enjoying each other's presence, sometimes helping. My grandfather passed away a couple months ago, so there's been a lot of helping going on. And that's one of those things that I get to do today. I guess I'll list it third, but I'm still going to list it because it's an important one, is romantic relationships. Those back then, they were just every bit as selfish as anything else. And today, that's not so much the case. It's not selfish. It's not manipulative. My second wife, we've been together for over 5 years now. The joke was always that she was the newcomer, and that's, I mean, technically it's true. But at the time, let's see, it was a long story there. But the last time that she came to pick up a white chip was when we officially started dating. So here we are, 5 years later. And gosh, coming up, it's the time flies. It's crazy. And that's something completely new to me. Having worked the steps, the way that I see that relationship today is completely different. I was short of being physically abusive, just about anything that you could imagine. I was that guy in the past. Um, and it's a miracle, you know. Um, Getting to the relationships I talked about, men in the program. The other side I didn't mention yet is the sponsorship. Getting to take other alcoholics through the steps. That's I don't know, the buzz that I get from sitting down. There is probably nothing as good as that. Sitting down and seeing the light come on, or when a newcomer starts to get a little bit of hope. I still remember what that was like. To not have the hope. And that's a big one. I could go on and on. The benefits are pretty great. I highly recommend it in case anybody's wondering.
Me too. There was a guy, Rick, who early on when I came in, and he would always say, and I was one of those in and out white, I probably could have made a belt with all the white chips that I had. I was a chronic, it got to the point where I hated, and I still to this day, I don't like calling it relapse. I call it default mode. That was, I would just go into default mode and I just didn't want to stop. But anyway, he would say, I remember him saying to me, he said, he said, you really ought to try these 12 steps. He said, if you don't like them when you're done, you can go right back out,
Mm-hmm.
And it was like such a helpful way to like, yeah, maybe I should just try it because what I'm doing is not working, for sure. I did want to ask though, like, what is like one of your favorite recovery tools? Like, what's one of your go-tos?
My favorite, Joe, that's a tough one. Favorite as far as efficiency and favorite as far as go-to are two different things. Go-to today, I never would have been that. I don't know when this changed, but today it's prayer. That was not the case. I did not come into this thing religious. I don't come from a religious background at all. But that throughout the program, this relationship with a power greater than myself has been pretty amazing. And today I can say that the first go-to is prayer. Inventory is one of my least favorite things to do. It is also one of if not the most effective for me. Same thing. Another thing that's difficult for me is those relationships that I was talking about. There's still that ego that makes the phone weigh so much when I need to pick it up. I don't know what that's about, but when it's a good day, it's easy to make those calls. And when I'm needing some help, it sucks. But that's another one. So I don't know. You can rank those how you choose. But between the three, it's all good stuff.
It is, and my favorite thoughts about prayer is that prayer may never change the situation, but it always changes me. So prayer is a big one for me too, David. And I never thought that would be. I never thought I'd go back to that kind of stuff, and it's just it works. It's effective, and I'm grateful to be comfortable enough to do it. And hear you say it too it's just like reinforcement. Like, yep, that's a good one.
Absolutely.
And inventory stuff does suck. I'm just saying it. Saying it out loud. What would you say to somebody who might be listening who feels like they're beyond hope?
There's no such thing as beyond hope. That's exactly what I thought I was too. There are parts. Always, I've never told my full story. I guess things get skipped around, and that's just the way that it goes. And I'll leave things out. One of the things between the legal stuff and the physical stuff, I was one of those people that the book talks about with the like the real DTs with the hallucinations, seizures and things. And I thought to stop was to die, um, the legal stuff and everything else, all of the things that I had sworn that I would never do. Back in the beginning, I said, oh, I'm not so bad because I'm not doing X, Y, or Z. Well, X, Y, or Z happened, um, it's just crazy. I would give it a shot. If it worked for me, I would imagine that it probably could work for just about anyone.
Absolutely. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we haven't?
You mentioned in the beginning, Joe, about the service stuff, and that's been a huge part of it for me. It turned out that the social anxiety and things that the alcohol helped with, they were still there when I got sober. So especially in the first couple years, I was real quiet, real shy in meetings. So an easy way for me to get involved back then in the beginning was service stuff, whether it was making coffee or chairing a lot of meetings. I chaired a whole lot of meetings in the beginning, and that was important because I couldn't speak as eloquently as all these other people that were sharing all this great stuff that was so helpful to me. So for me, it felt to give back, the best thing I could do was chair the meeting, sign the calendar and facilitate and be of service that way. Because I didn't feel that I was being of as much service by sharing. But moving on from there, I got involved at the district level pretty quickly too. I've done all sorts of different things. And those commitments, whether it's at the group level or the district level, those commitments have meant a ton to me. They keep me involved, help me to stay, to meet people that maybe I wouldn't meet on the other hand. We get used to our meetings. I do anyway. I get comfortable. And if I'm going to the same 2 or 3 groups, then I'm seeing the same people. Getting involved in doing things like that and branch out, meet new people, go to new places, new towns. There's cities that I've been to in the service of AA here in Tennessee that I didn't know existed. And most recently, I guess the newest thing that I've been doing is this corrections business, taking a meeting in. And it's all, as of right now, I guess, I don't know if it's because it's still new. So it's exciting, or whether it really just is that good. But the corrections stuff is probably my favorite as of yet. But yeah, the service work, that's been crazy important to me in a way that I'm probably understating now even. But really good stuff.
Well, it is, and that's where David and I met at the corrections thing. I'm like the new baby going to the corrections, but it's pretty powerful. It really is. It's pretty, it's becoming one of my favorite things that I've done, in a while, and it's helping me to I've been kind of in a rut over the last year of just feeling like I was not growing as much as I wanted to grow, and feeling kind of, I don't know, not as good spiritually. And that's one of the things that has really helped to kind of move me in a different direction. So, and meet you, and which is cool, being somebody new, Well, I can't let you go, David, without doing our rapid fire questions. I know you've studied, but no, I'm just kidding. I know you haven't studied. I'm just kidding. That's a joke. If you could see David, the look that David gave me, like, are you out of your mind?
No, I didn't study back then, and I don't study.
That's why I thought the joke would work pretty good. No,
Oh, goodness. What you got? Hit me.
All right. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
Joe, I don't know if it's a real slogan or not, but the Rule 62 thing. I don't know, that's out of the literature, not necessarily a slogan, but I do that. I take myself real seriously sometimes, and when I don't, things. There we go. Yeah, Joe's got a little Rule 62 thing. I love it. When I don't, things are a whole lot easier.
My favorite studio sign.
Mm-hmm.
It is a slogan. What is your least favorite recovery slogan?
It'll be easy does it. Easy does it, Joe. I've never, I don't know. It's just one of those. It's like, no, I don't do anything easy. It's like go, go, go is still the way that I am. And that makes me, it's difficult for me to slow down still. That's something that, as a newcomer, I was that way. And to a certain extent, I still am. There are things that I say that drinking ruined for me. And like watching a complete TV show or a complete movie is one of those things. Like I'm got to be doing something. So that one, the easy does it, has never, I understand what it's about. It just doesn't compute up here.
What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
I imagine service or something to do with it. I don't know. There's a lot of people that don't like it. I've heard that a lot. There's a lot of people that don't have the patience for it or whatever. That's not been my experience. So I don't know.
If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
I don't know, Joe. I think I'm gonna pass on this one, as I'm of the opinion I've been led to believe, and I think that it's true, that if it weren't for every little thing that happened back then, those are the things that got me to the point of willingness that I eventually reached. Anything that may have changed, anything that I did or didn't do back then, anything I heard or didn't hear back then, without every little bit of that, who am I to say that I would be where I am today?
Fair enough. What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
I really don't have one. I don't listen to a ton of music anymore. That's been one thing. That's another thing that drinking kind of between drinking and family life ruined for me. Really any music, Joe. Like I said, I don't listen to a lot, so just putting on whatever's playing on the radio is normally good enough for me when I need it.
If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
I don't know that I have one of those either. I think that's one of those that kind of falls in line with the previous one that I passed. That, but I guess I already passed on one, so I'll say that everything turns out exactly as it should.
I was going to say, David, rule number 62, you can't pass on two. It's illegal.
I would remind you of Rule 62.
I hear you. That's all right. What step do you love the most?
Third step, 100%. It is a constant struggle, constant companion of mine. I want to take it back. I want to take it back all the time. And I have to keep turning it over. So 100% third step.
What step do you love the least?
I don't know. Maybe the third step as well, because it gives me as much trouble as it does. That's probably the fairest thing that I can give you. Although making amends, it's one of those things that you would think you get better with practice as time goes on. That's not, I don't enjoy making amends any more today than I did the first one I made. So that one, probably a tie. We'll go with that.
I hear you. What is one of your favorite movies?
Well, like I said, I don't watch many of them anymore. I can tell you from way back when, there's a lot. I was always a big Lord of the Rings fan. So any of those, that's a good one. The Departed is another good one. If anybody that hasn't seen that should look that up. Fight Club, weird. There's all kinds of weird movies from way back when. So
those were good ones. Definitely good ones. And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I've never thought about that before. But I imagine something kind of cliche like welcome home. Yeah, something like that.
That'd be pretty cool. Man, thank you so much, David, for taking the time to share your experience, strength, and hope, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me.
Yeah, it's been an honor. And for the rest of you out there, please subscribe to our friends at thedailyponderables.com, your recovery source for inspiration and encouragement every day. A new episode of The Cup of Joe Show is released every Thursday at noon. Visit thecupofjoeshow.net, or you can listen to the show on your favorite podcast apps, Podbean, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." Please like, follow, subscribe, and share, because someone out there needs to hear this today. Have a good day, everybody.
It's just a laid-back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's experience, strength, and hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to The Cup of Joe Show.